Hello, my name's Colin Farmery, executive producer of the feature-length documentary Our Club, the story of how the fans of Portsmouth FC saved their football club. Around 11 years ago, my team was in the Premier League and had recently won the FA Cup. Little did I realise I was about to embark on the most incredible journey of my personal and professional life. In the end, my club really was going to become my club, owned along with 2,500 other Pompey fans. This film tells that story. And I'm delighted to be joined today all the way from Melbourne, Australia, by Barney Fox, director and producer of the film. And what we're going to do is we're going to relive the story of how this film came to be made.
What a triumph to celebrate, and Harry Redknapp, in his first experience of a major occasion, is a Wembley winner.
Hang on, this is Portsmouth Football Club. We've got 20,000 fans coming every week. We're in the Premier League. Everything's going to be all right.
I suppose when you look back, one of the questions is, how do you ever know whether these people have actually got the money or not?
I think it's got to go to the wire. I think there's an awful lot of stuff behind the scenes that we don't know about.
It was time to call a halt to a dictatorial ownership that did everything without talking to the fans, without speaking to them, without confiding in them.
Overlap! All day!
They're so proud of their football club, they wanted to let it go. And that's what happened.
Yeah, crikey, it's probably 2013, 2014 that you and I first met. So maybe the first thing we ought to do is just, perhaps you can tell everyone how this came about and how you came to be in the office talking to me about this film.
Yeah, blimey, we are rolling back the years, it feels like. Yeah, I mean, look, I think I've maybe sort of told a few people kind of the story of how this came about. Is I studied at the University of Surrey, kind of when Pompey were really in the heyday for me, and they were kind of everybody's, best second team. And I remember being there when, Sol Campbell went and lifted the FA Cup, etc., etc. And then in 2013, the back end of it, I went to Fratton Park with a mate of mine who was a Notts County fan, and it was Notts County versus Portsmouth. And I got there and I just couldn't believe it. I just was like, hang on a minute, the last time I remember this club, it was Wembley, yeah. There was, you had half the England team playing for you. And I just thought, what has gone on? And true to Pompey fashion, the pitch was waterlogged. So the game got called off, and we just went into, I think we were in one of the lounges, actually. We were guests, which is really nice. And we just went in and heard all of these stories and thinking, hang on, how did this happen to a football club of this size? And then the friend who I was with at the time was a wannabe filmmaker, and I use that title lightly. And he sort of said, okay, well, why don't we try and do something? And I think at the time, you might have been doing sort of a little bit of freelance ad hoc work, and I'd just come off the back of the bid team stuff. So I think, got the kind of the gig, I suppose, of if anybody from a third party was going to come in, you were kind of like the first port of call at the time. And I just remember the club. I mean, no disrespect, it wasn't disorganised, but there was definitely kind of, well, hang on, who's doing what and what's going on here? So I think that's how we got to, and I just remember us sitting up in the, I can't remember what lounge it was now. And we were just sort of, I think initially we sort of just maybe talked about a sort of 15, 20 minute sort of summary really of what happened. Is that how you remember it?
Yeah, I mean, it is, and I mean, to be honest, you're right. I was doing a little bit of freelance work for Pompey then, sort of just helping them out with their PR and trying to get their comms strategy together, sort of like as a newly formed community club. And I've been involved, obviously, with the politics beforehand, and I'd helped with the communications for the bid to buy the club, and I've been involved in all the ways in which we were trying to get some of the more suspect owners out, along with other people. So. At that time, to be honest, you weren't the only one in the market. There were probably about 4 or 5 filmmakers coming on to me saying they wanted to tell the Pompey story. But I suppose you were the one who kind of like hung in there really. And I think it was probably about, and you can remind me of it, it was probably about 2014. I think you we got you in to do your first session because I've got approval from kind of Mark Catlin, the chief executive, that this was a project that we were run with. And I think it wasn't it the York game in 2014 you came down to?
Yeah, the York game. Well, actually, I tell you what, the first day we turned up was must have gone down in, and you can correct me on this, but would have been one of Pompey's shortest managerial stints in Richie Barker. The first day we turned up was when he was appointed, and we we rocked up, and I think you managed to get like a banner behind Richie Barker, kind of like made up last minute, and it was a little bit scattered, a little bit here and there. And we kind of turned up and thought, what's going on here? And so the idea is you introduced us to Richie and said, oh, hey, these are the guys that think, we're going to do this project and blah-de-blah-de-blue. And then we'd penciled in the York game, and that was going to be our first game. We were just going to come and suss the place out and figure out what was possible and what wasn't. And we were going to almost try and build it around the uprising of the club under this new manager. It was really exciting times at Fratton Park. So we came down to the York game, did a little bit of filming, and then we did some interviews. That was when we interviewed people like Pam Wilkins, Mick Williams, and whatnot, just to kind of understand the story. And I remember we popped over to McDonald's to get a coffee, and then the other chap I was with at the time, he said, "You just won't believe this." And we looked up, and it must have been on like a BBC Sport app or something like that, and it was Richie Barker leaves Fratton Park by mutual consent or something. And so we kind of just had this hands in our head moment and just thought, oh, great. We've literally wasted 4 days now. And I think what that did was we learned pretty quickly that, things were not going to be straightforward with this film. And it was perhaps going to be a roller coaster to get it done, which it proved to be.
Indeed, and I think Richie was possibly one of those people that it wasn't quite the right club for him at the right time in that sense. And I think Richie's gone on to have a great career at kind of Rotherham, I think, as an assistant. I think he's MK Dons and stuff now. So he wasn't a bad bloke per se, but I think in the end the Portsmouth thing wasn't quite right for him. And I think after that, I think we had Andy Orford came in, and he actually saved us from going out the league, because I mean when Richie left, I think we were third from bottom in League Two. So there we were. We won the FA Cup kind of right in 2008, and by 2014 we were in danger of going out of the Football League altogether. And I think it was Andy Orford that kind of turned us around and kind of came on board as the manager there. So. How did from your perspective the kind of filming go from there? Because obviously you come down and done some location stuff, but I think fairly early on you seem to get into the idea of doing some stuff with doing some sort of set piece interviews. What was the thinking behind that? Well,
yeah, it was interesting because when Richie went, you summed up really nicely. Is the narrative already changed then? Is because when Andy came in, he was effectively putting out fires. Like the narrative had already changed from when we initially started to when Andy Orford came in. So basically when we started, it was like, okay, let's tell the story of the community saving the football club and then being on the up. And then within, weeks, or it would have been, maximum months, it was actually, well, hang on a minute, this club could drop out the Football League. So they've, 12 months ago, they were trying to, the fans were coming together to save the club. And now they could fully drop out of it. So, where does that go? There was all this idea of saving this club to keep it in the league, but then just through not performing on the pitch, they were going to drop out. So the set piece, well, what we were trying to establish, remember, I'm not a Pompey fan, and never claimed to be. So when we got down there, we didn't really know what to expect. We'd never done, I'd worked in sports films before, but never with a football club. And so you have to kind of figure out the logistics. You have to figure out who to get to know, where you can go, where you can't go, who you need to chat to. So those first couple of shoots, you're almost, they're just your testing ground. That's simply it. You're right, okay, we can get in here and we can do this and we can do that. Now, when you're doing that, you're also picking out those characters who come across, one well on camera, who are kind of, they don't, I suppose the camera doesn't intimidate them, So it doesn't change their personality. And I think early on we picked out people like Ian McInnes. You know, with some people you would say, look, we want to follow you around the club now. And it was kind of like, oh, okay. And, you know, we turned the camera on and it was literally like a flick of a switch. It was like sort of very rigid, very upright, and oh, okay. And so you think, okay, well, that's not really the personality that you were a second ago. But then, you know, credit where credit's due to Ian McInnes. It was kind of, you know, we'd almost catch Ian when coming into the club and say, oh, hi, Ian, we're going to follow you today. Is that all right? Yeah, no worries, lads. That's absolutely fine. Yeah, and it was kind of like straight in. And I think that's where you've got some of those shots with him and Tony Brown, you know, in the stands. And literally we would put GoPros around areas at the time. And, you know, we would just let them be. And all of a sudden, because they're such little cameras, that the tension between the character and the camera just dies down straight away because the person just totally forgets about it. And I think that's where we got some of the absolute gold. I remember myself and an associate producer, Remy Martin, we did an away day to Oxford, and we were on Paul Banks's bus, and it was just an absolute belter of a day. And everybody just, you know, we got on. Remy did a little talk before we got. He said, "Look, you know, we're going to come on. We're going to do a bit of filming today. We just want to capture the away day around Fratton Park. You know, from 6:30 in the morning, it was singing, it was cheering. You know, it was just a really enjoyable day, and people kind of just stepped up to it really, and they didn't hide from it, which I think is a really nice thing about Portsmouth. Is kind of people are very proud of where they're from, and they're proud of their football club. So it's kind of like, well, I don't really want to be anything different on camera. So gradually those segments kind of build up, but then you've got this side thing of, well, we're capturing all this stuff in the moment, but then you've got the narrative. So you're doing two things at once. Is you're building up this kind of, let's say, this timeline of the present day, but yet you're researching what had happened. So initially when we came in, it was kind of characters like yourself. Obviously, you know, there are people like Michael Hall who have been on Sky Sports and things like that previously. So those characters kind of stood out. But then I think between the two of us, we were like, oh, okay, maybe we'll have a talk to this person. Maybe we'll have a talk to this person. I think, what did we capture in the end? Like 38 people, was it?
I think it was more than that, to be honest. And I mean, it is quite interesting because I think one of the things, I was kind of holding this project for the football club, in terms of like ensuring that the reputation of the football club wasn't going to be kind of undone by this. Because we've seen with some kind of documentaries where, the QPR one springs to mind, and more recently the Sunderland Netflix one, where actually you're not sure that a film has done the football club any favours. So I think I always had in my mind that I wanted to ensure that the football club's kind of reputation wasn't going to be undermined by this film. But I think also the journalist in me, if you like, also wanted to ensure that we did the story justice. So I think ultimately, I think you may disagree with me on this, but I think I wanted to give you quite a degree of editorial freedom to try to ensure that the story was done justice. Would that be fair?
Oh, I didn't feel, no, of course it did. No, I think that's worth it. I remember in that initial meeting that we had was, I think you even said something along the lines, there will be some skeletons in the closet. And it was kind of like, let's just blow the door open on this. And I think we kind of followed that idea throughout the film. And I think it set the tone for the interviews. It's like, look, we're not going to take sides on this. And you never took a side on it. And I think, I remember chatting to someone like Michael Hall, and very clearly on, we would talk about different people, and you would always come up. And I remember Michael always said to me, Colin's famous line is, to be fair. And I think that was ever so true, is from your side of things, I think you were always really keen to kind of show that you never took any sides. And obviously, Remy and myself, we never could take any sides because we didn't know. We were learning it as we went. We would then subsequently go off and research. And I suppose because we weren't emotionally involved in it at the time, we didn't we didn't form any natural alliances. And maybe, we were going to interviews with people and we think, oh, we've been told this about this person. It's going to be really difficult. Come on, let's just nail them on that part there. But we get in and it was kind of like, no, hang on, let's just stick to the script. Let's just stick to what we feel the story is. And we would say to people, look, this is how we see it. If you disagree, you need to tell us. And that's absolutely fine. So it really was a character-led film. And it was only at the last minute that Ian Darke came in to do the narration, which was absolutely vital in the end, because I think what would have been really lost is so many voices without that great work, that great stitching work that Ian brought as well, Ian Darke brought to it. So I think you're right. Is the worry in these projects is that you get a producer or a director who comes in with his or her point of view, or they work for a bigger production company and they say, right, this is our overall goal, and then you're kind of manipulating the content to fit to that. Whereas we were doing it the other way around, and there were points in the film where I think the ongoing joke is that we would get to a point and it'd be like, right, we're gonna make this film now. And I think that started back in 2016. And then it was kind of like, oh, should we just interview this person, or should we need to have a chat with this person?
Well, I think just on that point, I think it's probably an interesting one to kind of explore. Really, was I think one of the things we probably realised as well, that journalistically, that there was a little bit of kind of right of reply coming up here as well, because if you're going to put stuff on screen, you can't actually just kind of like diss somebody. You've got to actually potentially give that individual some right to reply. So perhaps you could talk. I mean, one of obviously you spoke to people like Joe McAlchuk and Mark Moody, who were fairly kind of like Marmite fan figures at the time. But I think one of the key things one of the key interviews that were quite interesting, or two really, were kind of like Peter Storey and also kind of like Balram Chenrai. Can you explain a bit how those two interviews came about?
Yeah, so I think what we've done is we got to a stage where we've got kind of one side of the story, and then we started talking to the likes of Joe and Mark, and they had a different point of view, and that's simply what it was. It was a valid point of view, and they were interested in the football side of things, and to be, to coin your phrase, Colin, is to be fair. Like, the clubs that play in the championships and the clubs that play in the Premier League, they need money, and actually, is there an argument where a lot of football fans just care about seeing great football? That was a common thing talking to a lot of people at Portsmouth. It's like, yeah, very well, it's great, we're all fan owned, that's wonderful, but we actually really want to see Man United back here, we want to see Liverpool back here. No disrespect to lower teams, but we really want that high quality of football. So having those conversations, it was pretty obvious that there was a different perspective on things. So we kind of started putting the feelers out, and in exactly what you said there is you simply say to these people, look, we've done this. And I think that worked really well in mine and Remy's favour, is that we were just getting on with stuff. We didn't have sort of, a big network behind us making decisions, and things would take, weeks on end. It was literally like, right, okay, let's go down next Wednesday. Let's just book it in. Let's just get this done. And we were very sort of fast moving, very fast paced. A criticism of this by someone was, two lads in a car following a football team. That's exactly what it was. It generally was. It was like, right, let's jump on it now. Let's jump on the opportunity. So we met with Peter Storey first. Peter had heard that we were doing the film, and he gave me a phone. I think his numbers were exchanged, and I said, look, if you're in town, if you're going to come up to London, let's just sit down. And you make the process really easy. And again, we would turn up, two of us, a light to be set up, and everything would be ready to go straight away. So people are not hanging around. And so what you do get is you kind of get this level of energy that comes out, and people just want to go. Whereas I think if you were hanging around for like an hour at a time, it's kind of like, oh, my energy's sapped now, let's just get through it. And the likes of Peter is you go through, you try and make it quite simple in the discussions you have. And I think that, the line that stands out for me is, when he says, how do you know whether these people have got the money? And the way that question came about is that we kind of talked about the process of how people, how do you buy a football club effectively? And as someone who saw this in very layman's terms, I was thinking, well, there has to be a point whenever you do any transaction, whether it's, you're buying a chocolate bar down at Tesco, or whether you're buying a house or something, there comes a point where it's like, well, have you got the money? How far can you go? And I just thought that was really quite a simplistic way when he said, well, how do you know whether these people have got the money? And it just shows, I think we see this world as very sophisticated, but it is, but it's also a business world. then when we met Balram, that was quite a process. We managed to catch up with him in London. I think I caught him for breakfast when he was where he was staying in a hotel, and we were WhatsApping each other. And I kind of had to give him a little bit of confidence to say, look, this is the right thing to do. This is going to go out. And I think that's a very powerful thing as well, is when you say to people, look, we've already got the other side. This is going to be aired. You might want to respond to this. It becomes quite powerful, and people go, actually, yeah, I do want to have a response to this. So we met with Balram, and incredibly accommodating, and we sat there, and that was quite a fun experience because he kind of had his let's say his colleagues around him and things like that. So again, we had to kind of really get into that fast. He was like, literally, I've got 45 minutes. Let's get this going. So I'm kind of like setting up in this restaurant. And it actually ended up being quite a nice shot, to be honest with you. And it was quite a funny story at the end of it. He said, oh, what are you up to for the rest of the day? And I said, oh, I'll probably just end up going back home. And I think, it was a December cold day. And I said to him, he said, oh, well, do you fancy coming to the Arsenal game? I think Arsenal are playing at the Emirates. And I thought, oh, I'd love to. I love watching Arsenal. I thought that won't go down very well if imagine Neil Allen writing that, film director gets taken by Balram Jamrai. So I politely declined and said, that's a very kind offer, but no, thank you. So I think we were really simple in that sense. And we like you said, we offered a right of reply and kept it that simple and just said, these are the questions we've asked. What do you think? Tell us. Go. And that was it.
Yeah. And I think kind of to think about how this narrative developed. I mean, obviously Andy Orford had a short spell with the club, and then in the summer of 2015, I think Pompey brought in Paul Cook as the manager, and I think it's probably fair to say that Cookie bought into kind of what this film was trying to do. Have you got some memories of that? Some of your initial kind of like interactions with Cookie on the film.
Oh, Cookie on the film, blimey, what a character. First of all, what a character he was. And I remember sort of Remy and we met him at the training ground, and he was always all over the place. He was sort of like the total opposite to what Kenny Jackett is. When we met Kenny for the first time, it's all right, lads, how you doing? Very calm, very sort of, whereas Cookie just sort of seemed to have 1,000 things going at once. And it was like, yeah, no, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this. And it's sort of this really broad Scouse accent. And Cookie was very kind of like, no, my team is the first, my team is the priority. Your documentary is going to be the second. You're going to have to fit around me. And in time, you build up trust. And I think that's why we got some of the shots that we did. Because by the end of kind of filming, it was kind of, oh, Barney and Remy are here. Oh, Barney and Remy here. We kind of became part of the furniture, but that takes time. But Cookie totally bought into what I think he bought into Ian McInnes's energy. He the two of them always had energy about them. I never saw them publicly kind of very low. I think behind closed doors, like we captured on the last day, there was, they obviously had a really good bond between them, and they were obviously, they kind of both bought into what this club needed to do. But I think, I think in the film we show Cookie on the sideline at Plymouth, and perfectly that sums up to me what, all those little behind the scenes, I think when he's coming in and, the refs behind him when, I can't remember who got sent off in the first leg of the playoff final at Fratton Park. But, the ref's coming down the tunnel and you've got Cookie just belting at him, ref, what is that all about? And I think that was a really interesting side to it. Again, is, we think this is a very sort of sophisticated level of conversation. But behind the scenes, it's not. It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. The language is atrocious. And Cookie was his character, and he was a fighting character. But at the time, I remember chatting to him after the Plymouth game when we got knocked out at home park. That was a real, you're really picking them off the floor and just trying to have like nice conversations with them, and they're just really involved, which must be exhausting, I think.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Plymouth game was a bit of a watershed, I think, in terms of the film as well, because I think we had high hopes that there might be some kind of glorious Wembley ending that we could hang the film on in that sense. So I suppose when Pompey lost to Plymouth in that playoff semi-final, to a certain extent, it kind of, I think it would be fair to say, it probably sucked a little bit of energy out of us. I think that was kind of, we got to a point where we weren't quite sure where we were going with this.
Well, I think we would, and I remember I drove down to Plymouth and I'd sort of done the journey there and back from London, which is 5 hours, 10 hours in the car. And one of the characters, Nick Bain, I met him down there. So I'd kind of got down there really early, did the interview, great interview with him, and then sort of went on to the match and then drove home. And I remember just driving home thinking, we've really, by this point, we'd been going at this film for quite some time. We'd had some kind of ups and downs off camera. And I was just thinking, this isn't, the gods are really not shining on us. And I remember, Remy and I chatted about it, and I think he summed it up really well. And he said, the underlying tone that we're getting from this is just because you're community owned, just because you've done it the right way, doesn't mean anything, sadly. If you're not winning on the pitch, guess what? You're not going to be, you're not going to be going up the table. And I think for a long time, that was going to be the reality of the film. It was always going to be like, the fans came in, saved the club. Different opinions here, there and everywhere, but ultimately the fans saved the club. But you know what? Doesn't matter whether you're fan ownership, private ownership. If you don't perform on the pitch, the table tells the story at the end of the season.
And I think to add a bit of kind of like energy to it, I think it was around about that time. I remember I was approached by a production company that in the end I think wanted to do something along the lines of what ended up the Sunderland Till I Die kind of like concept. And I remember you and I we had a conversation around that at the time, whether or not that was something that we could potentially kind of like go down the line with. And I think you and I kind of eventually agreed. And also having spoken with Mark Catlin as well around it, that there were two factors here. One, we kind of felt Pompey attempting to get out of League Two wouldn't be helped by the distraction of a kind of like another camera crew coming in and doing some work around that. But I think also tying our film project to that particular star, we kind of felt that really it would take away some of our control in terms of what we wanted to tell. And what we wanted to tell was our story, I suppose, rather than somebody else's version of kind of like our story. So I think at that time, we kind of put aside that kind of idea about sort of effectively subcontracting the concept, so to speak. And I think it was probably around that time as well. We got in some quite prolonged discussions with another documentary film producer who probably bought more into what we were trying to do. But again, to be fair, that eventually didn't go anywhere either. But we also kind of we kind of had a bit of luck, didn't we? Really, in that sense, because I think I think this did give a little bit of kind of like boost to our energy levels in terms of getting the film done. And I think Pompey were doing quite well in League Two, kind of like in the spring of 2017. But I think you relocated out to Australia by then. But maybe you can kind of just bring together, set the scene. We're in kind of like April 2017. Suddenly, community ownership is up for grabs because Michael Eisner has kind of come on the scene. Pompey are in a blindside run for kind of like, well, we won promotion, but there's a potential blindside run for the championship on the cards. And I think you pack up your cameras from Melbourne, come over to Portsmouth. So tell us what happened, Barney.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll just go back a little bit. I think that's an interesting point to pick up on is kind of the third parties coming in, because I think where it gave us confidence is that we'd been doing this for some time. We kind of kept it a bit close to our chest. There was obviously murmurs going around that this was being made, and I think as a filmmaker, the first hurdle you get over with is when you're sort of, your fellow peers come in and look at it and you think, oh, okay, this is going to be testing here. And there's always going to be a critical eye on these things. So we'd had a couple of discussions, and I think, maybe confidence was low after the Plymouth game. But what we had realised is we had something. We absolutely had something. Okay, it might not have been to everybody's taste. It wasn't the big production. And like you said, those conversations were actually, if we let people in, that, you know, you will have 8 or 9 people at Fratton Park. And that's, you know, when the Netflix guys have been down there to film for Sunderland, they turn up with 8 or 9 people. It's a big production. The whole feel of the thing changes straight away. So, you know, I think together we realised that we needed to try and control the narrative a little bit. And I think that's a question that's been kind of, you know, brought up after this film was made, is, well, why didn't you go down the net? Why didn't you do that? And why didn't you do that? Ultimately, you cannot guarantee what the outcome looks like. Fact. And like you've alluded to at the beginning of this is, you know, I look at some things, you know, that are shown, and you go, does that really help? You know, has the documentary for Sunderland really helped them? I don't know. It certainly hasn't on the pitch, obviously. So you then go to a sort of an integrity question. You go, well, hang on a minute. I've sat with these people and I've said that this is what we're going to do. If all of a sudden you go, actually, we're going to package it up, we're going to shift it onto someone else, you lose that right. Fact. You don't have that right to control that. And ultimately, those never came to fruition because we were not given the guarantees. Now, we could have gone, yeah, great, gone. Good job done. Thanks ever so much. But I think we would have left a lot of people in a lot of limbo, especially the likes of yourself, who had sort of entrusted us to tell this story. So we just went down a slightly different path. And I think a slightly more, I want to say the word sort of earthy, which it is. It's more down to earth, our film. And that's a fact. Okay, it's not as pretty as others, but it's more down to earth. You've got, the interviews are great. Okay, some things we'd love to have changed. But to the final day, yeah, so it all kind of comes together. We'd had these conversations on the side, and you're right, I'd moved out to Melbourne. My partner, she's Australian, and we, you know, this is how long this film process went on for us. We moved to Melbourne. I then went and got a job on a production in Los Angeles and San Francisco, and I had downtime in Los Angeles, and I think we spoke because we were talking quite regularly then about, oh, should we, you know, we were talking more sort of business, I suppose. And I think we both might have been, and I said, look, why don't I come over? This was when Michael Eisner was kind of, the Tornante group was coming in. And it was obviously a lot quicker to get back from Los Angeles to the UK than Melbourne to the UK. So I think you just said, well, look, come on down. Look, let's chat this. Let's have a chat over a cup of tea, and we'll see if we can figure out. And by the way, we've got a game on that day, so it'll be fine. You know, I'll get you a seat, and off you go. And I think I flippantly said, well, look, I'll bring the cameras as well, and we'll just see what happens. And the rest was history. No one could have predicted that. No one could have predicted that ending. I don't think you could have either.
I don't know how I managed to get that past Marie to get you in there.
No, exactly. Yeah, that's you know. That's another story. God bless Marie. Thanks ever so much, Marie. I'm not going to come on here and say anything of negativity around Marie. She was absolutely fantastic. Made us prove ourselves before we were set free on Fratton Park, and quite rightly so. Quite rightly so. So that final day, really, I think maybe the persistence of filming had paid off, and maybe someone up there was going, okay, we'll give these guys the ending to the film that they need. And I think, even in the film, the way that we've cut it with the graphics, it's kind of like, you know, what is it? 3 teams became, you know, top of the league within that period. So when we're building the graphics in the edit, it's like, well, hang on a minute, you know, who's doing there? And I remember when we were doing that, you know, me and you were back and forth. Well, hang on a minute, what? You know, you're going back and going, right, on the 70th minute, it was like this, and that was probably the hardest part of the film to put together. Not because of, you know, footage, just because of trying to get it chronologically perfect. And you know, and I think, you know, we would love to have put more of that ending, but was it really relevant to the story that we were telling? I think it was kind of like, to me, that the film ended up having two narratives, really. Was one, a community can run a football club, and 2, that model can get you out the league. And I think if we kind of looked at it in a very critical way and said, did we tell that narrative? Then yes, we did. Now, did we put the bells and whistles on at the end with, you know, Paul Cook and Ian McInnes having a couple of beers down in the changing rooms, and, you know, that final day. Well, no, we didn't. We didn't. But that wasn't our objective. Our objective was to tell those two things. Community ownership works, and it can get you out the leagues. And that was what hopefully we did, and that's what hopefully the audience get.
And yeah, I think there's probably a director's cut on that final day around somewhere. I would have thought that you want to do at some point. So I'll let you think about that one. But I think, you know, now we really had a story, didn't we? In that sense, you know, I think it come to a great kind of like ending. So we knew that was our finish point. But, you know, to a certain extent, in terms of getting the film onto the screen, you know, our kind of troubles were only just beginning in that sense. And I remember one of the guys we spoke to, he kind of said, you know, to get any film off the ground, you know, you need thermodynamic nuclear energy to kind of just get the thing going in the first place. And I think it's a great line that has always kind of stuck with me in that sense. But yeah. I think probably, you know, cut a long story short, I think we got to around about, you know, Christmas 2018. And I think, you know, we were beginning to run out a bit of a few options, really, in terms of how this film was going to be made. We tried to put together a package. We'd applied for some funding from the British Film Foundation that hadn't kind of come off. So we were at a very low point, I think, around 2018. And we had, at the end of 2018, and we had a feeling that this film was never going to be made. Mm. But then we had another kind of stroke of luck, which we kind of like made to a certain extent. But perhaps you want to bring in and tell us a bit about Ian Sylvester's involvement.
Yeah, I mean, Ian Sylvester, who for those who don't know who Ian is, and he's very good at keeping himself very quiet, so he's going to kill me for this. You know, was someone who was involved in the community bid, and I suppose the term, which I know not a lot of them like, is that, you know, the high net worth. He was one of them, and he's now gone on to be a Portsmouth Football Club president. He'd got wing when we would kind of, you know, working with other production companies, is somehow he kind of got wing of the film. And I think this is all happening is the film was going to be made, but it was to what level we were going to make it. And the reality is if you want to get archive and you want to get all of this stuff and you want to show all of that costs money. That's a simple fact. And that was the hardest thing, you know. It's like, oh, it'd be great if we had that shot of the FA Cup. It'd be great if we had the shot of the Canu goal. Right, okay, well, there's a pretty hefty price tag with that, and there is no way of getting around that. So, really, Ian was he was going to kind of be a part of a bigger team, I think, and was going to kind of be, I suppose, not maybe a smaller player in that. And then when these talks are kind of broken down, and I agree, it was kind of like, well, we've had a good go at this. We're going to now put something together. And that was literally our frame of mind. It was like, right, well, come on, sod it. We've done it. Let's just put it down. And I don't know how, but, you know, I think you might have said, well, Ian's still in the background and he might be, it was also Joe Collins had said, actually, we'd interviewed her and she said, I think I might know someone who might be able to help us out. And Ian came in, I remember rang Ian and he sort of said, yeah, I've heard this film's going on. What's going on with it? In sort of if anybody knows Ian, there's no sort of pleasantries really. It's kind of like, well, what's going on with this film? And I said, well, this is the situation. Films cost money, but we've actually done the majority of the legwork for it now. So it's a pretty sure thing that we can get this off the ground. And, you know, I think he simply said to me, it's like, come up with a menu of what will get us, you know, what sort of investment will get us, what sort of package. And we had an agreement and we figured it out. And in true Ian sense, things got done. You know, I think I coined him the Project Assassin. You know, remember, Ian was someone who was involved with the training ground project. You know, yeah. I think all fans can see how quickly that happened. You know, Ian, you know, now that I know Ian, it's kind of like, he's like a dog with a bone. It's like, right, well, we said we're going to do it, so we're going to do it. And I think what he did is he kind of maybe picked the team up and he was just like, right, don't worry about all the stuff that you've perhaps been worrying about for the last 6 to 12 months. Your job is to make the film. Any problems that come up, you need to tell me. And I think that was the one thing he said when he agreed to become an executive producer. And with that title does become, you know, responsibilities of funding and whatnot. He just said to me, and I remember I was on the phone, it was here in Melbourne, and he said, look, before you go, and I said, yeah, what? And he said, if you have any problems, you must tell me straight away. I want the truth. And I think that set the tone. It was like, we're going to do this. You know, if we have bills, we pay them fast. So the tone of the thing totally changed. It became a reality that this was going to happen. And it was also really good. So in a sort of a roundabout way, we had you that was kind of coming from the more grassroots side of things when the community bid and was kind of, you know, from the community side of it. And then we had someone who was in the field of the high net worth. So could then lend us, you know, he could then tell us about things that were perhaps going on from that side. And it was actually Ian, you know, I have to give Ian a lot of credit, because when we went into the editing, we kind of like had this massive whiteboard in the studio, and it was kind of like, right, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And we did a few runs of it, and Ian kind of said, well, I really want to I want to know where we come from and where we were. And that's why we've got that sequence at the beginning of the film where it's kind of like, and I think Ian Darke says it, you know, how did we get to this stage? 10 years earlier, bang, the rock music kicks in, the cup's lifted. And so it really set the scene. So, you know, there's no doubt that I suppose people who were involved dwindled away. And then, you know, dare I say it, the cream rose to the top. And it was kind of like, if you wanted to be involved in this project, by this stage, you'd already been through the blood, sweat and tears. So it was kind of like, if that wasn't going to beat you, then you were probably going to stay to the end.
Indeed, and I think in the end we'll probably gloss over that last week putting the final edit together as we were approaching the premiere in kind of like, you know, May 2019. But it's probably about this time last year. But yeah. I think that was a very intensive kind of process, because we knew we had this deadline of this premiere and we had to get the film done. But in the end, we did. And you know, we premiered it at the number 6 cinema in the Dockyard in Portsmouth. And can you kind of tell us how that moment felt, Barney, when you know, we're on the biggest screen in the South Coast. We've got 200 people filling an auditorium to watch the film, and there's your work on the big screen in that way. Perhaps you could kind of just tell us what that moment was like.
Yeah, look, just before I get into that, I think it's important to say that part of this whole process of getting the film together was that we'd always had that idea of playing it on the big screen at the number 6 cinema. And that was definitely something you really wanted. I remember from the beginning, it was kind of like, yeah, that was going to be, I think, everybody's sort of like wow moment. And I think the amazing thing to kind of say about Ian there is he had a holiday booked, and we actually said to him, look, we'll rearrange it. We really want you to be there. And this is how selfless he was. He was like, no, just go ahead and do it. And I just thought, wow, you know, he's in this for the right reasons. He definitely was not in this for the glory, you know. Look, that day was just really, yeah, and the lead up. But of course, I think that added to it. You were ill. You were really ill. I remember that. We were doing radio interviews, and, you know, you were really ill. I remember us driving around, and I was like, oh, poor Colin, what can I do to help him out? And, you know, we had files going. It was, you know, it all added to the drama of it. But I remember on the day, I think the turning point for me was when I was at the number 6, and we were literally going through a run through of the final, you know, in the morning. And I remember a woman at the box office at the number 6, and she was like, well, we'd like to buy some tickets, because we'd had, I think at the time we'd had 2 nights booked, you know, the following weeks. Yep. And she said, yeah, I want to put in, she said, and the guy said, we're really sorry, we're sold out. We're like, wow. I was like, wow, this is really weird. There's a woman getting annoyed that she can't come and see the film that I've made. Little does she know that I'm hearing this conversation. So I was like, oh, wow, people are buying into this. This is great. Or, oh dear, like there could be a lot of people who don't like this. The evening was great. You know, it was, you know, loads of people were there. It was great. It was the first time I'd seen everybody come back together. And, you know, it was really nice to see those familiar faces. And I think for me, what I'd really looked forward to was I think one of the best things about the film is the soundtrack. Thurston, our composer, did an amazing job in that undertone of kind of like island mentality on the film. And I was really looking forward to seeing that, to hearing that through the big speakers, you know. And I remember the guy who was the projectionist, I got to know him quite well, and I think he messed with me a little bit because he kind of put a little bit of a 30-second delay at the beginning of the film. So I kind of went to the back and was thinking, uh-oh. And I spoke to my dad the next day, and he said, I thought it was going to go wrong. Came up, and I think, look, to me, you're always really nervous when that happens. You're thinking, especially in a city where, you know, the club means so much. But the end credits came up, those last moments, Ian's words that kind of, you know, me and you had worked on so much with the music. That last shot of, you know, Tony Brown, Ian McInnes, you know, and when the credits came up, you know, applause rose, which was just, I couldn't believe it. And Mark Trapani just was, you know, characters like him who are, you know, they're pretty hard-nosed people. You know, they're no fools. You know, these people run very successful businesses. They know what's, you know, they know what works and they know what doesn't. And Mark Trapani came up to me, just gave me a massive hug. He was in tears. Bob Beach, classic Bob Beach. He said, "Don't take this the wrong way." I went, "Oh no, here we go, Bob. This will be a Twitter war." And he went, "Don't take this the wrong way. I didn't think it was going to be that good." So it was kind of like, right, well, whatever happens now doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, because all I'm going to do is just say, mess with Bob.
The only way is, I mean, I think that's probably a fantastic way to kind of bring this conversation to end. I think we, you know, we've had some great reminiscences there. So thanks for joining us all the way from Melbourne, Australia, in that sense. Barney, thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Cheers.